some noise for
Orange Juice in a Blunt.
Whoreson, the story of a ghetto pimp. The smoke was thick inside, and you could hear the sound of balls being broken open from the rack. Voices were raised in loud bantering, while shooters leaned across the tables, shooting with deadly eyes. The houseman stood behind a glass counter, selling pop and cigarettes, plus stale candy, to the few junkies sitting around, nodding. 3 street whores stood around the counter sipping pop, while they stared towards the back table, where their men were gambling. As I walked past them, I capped, "You want me to check and see if they done blowed the trap money?" A small, thin girl with a Coke in her hand shot back, "At least my man got some trap money to blow. That's more than that honky-tonk bitch you got is doing for you, yellow-ass nigga." My ears burned from her scream, and the loafers, sitting beside the wall, watching the pool players, broke out in laughter. A short, fat, brown-skinned hustler I played pool with sometimes remarked, "Whores can be awfully cold at times, Whoreson." I grinned at him. "You right about that, fat daddy. But I brought that on myself," I replied, and kept on walking towards the crap table. I tried not to let it show, but I was warm. If I had anything to do with it, I was going to make sure her old man didn't have any money when I pulled up. I knew him by sight, plus that his name was Ray, but that was all I knew about him. The crap game was roaring when I got there. I stood on the sidelines and watched the dice go around. It was mostly factory workers playing, with a sprinkling of hustlers. As I watched, I realized that very few of the so-called hustlers really knew how to get down. The game was ripe. Each shooter could pick up the dice and shoot them like he wanted to. If the fader didn't catch the dice, point seen, money lost. The dice finally came to Ray. He got covered for $20. I groaned when he shot the dice out. He was using the turn down, the same shot I was going to shoot, and he knew what he was doing. My plans for busting him began to dim as I watched the diamond on his little finger glitter. My diamond-studded watch needed some company, so I promised to buy myself a ring in the morning if I won. The house had a limit on passes. After you hit 5 licks, you had to pass the dice. Ray jumped a 4 for his 4th shot. He tried to get faded for $120, but wouldn't anybody fade him. Since this was his last shot, I decided to try and set him up. I knew he was crap-wise, and also wouldn't catch a point if I covered such a bet, so I wouldn't have time to slip in the bust-outs. I stepped over beside him. "I got you faded for the 20, baby. I want some of that whole money you be getting," I said, talking hip out of the side of my neck. He grinned at me. "Going for your 20, baby boy?" he said, and just as quickly tossed a 7 in the door. "Man," I exclaimed, "I'm glad I didn't fade the whole thing." The stick man, keeping the game moving, yelled, "Next shoot up!" I tossed $100 to him. "Shoot it," I yelled. "I almost blowed it fading, so I might as well bet it." I shot the dice out of my hand all the way down the table, the way a square would shoot. The dice stopped on 7, too. The stickman yelled, "Wait a minute, Red, you ain't even faded." Putting on my good square grin, I smiled. "That's all right, house man. I got plenty more of them 7s. Get me on." That kid jive stung, but I waited till his money was in the houseman's hand with mine. I picked the dice up and shot them away from Ray so he couldn't catch them. The dice spun like tops, neither one turning off the 5 deuce I'd set them on. Ray almost broke my ribs trying to push me aside so he could catch the spinning dice. I braced myself, though, and he couldn't have moved me out of the way with a Mack truck. 7! Yelled the gamekeeper. Shooter shooting 200! Ray stared at me angrily. His eyes were slits. Suddenly, he grinned. Boy, when you got me, you got a good one, he said quietly, then yelled, Bet the shooter hits! I couldn't get cover for but $50 the next shoot, then 20. The last two fades were for $10. I caught 4 on my last shot, and between the bets I could beat Ray to, I picked up $40 more on side bets. I jumped 4 and passed the dice. I waited until the dice had gone halfway around the table before I made another killing. A large, pot-gutted, light-skinned factory worker wearing bib coveralls was shooting. He had started with a $20 bet, hit, then shot the 40, hit, and now was trying to get on for the 80. I covered the whole bet, then prayed that he didn't come out the door with 7 or 11. When he caught 6, I bet 50 more around the board that he would miss. Ray was betting the odds, percentage and hunch, so he spread about 50 around the board that the shooter would miss. When the shooter turned the dice loose, I caught them and asked him to give me a shake. The dice I tossed back in his hand were bust-outs. When he 7'd out, I grabbed the dice and switched the proper ones back in the game. You sure know when to get down, kid, I mean get down, Ray said, and slapped me on the back. I didn't know if he had seen me switch, but for the rest of the game, we both bet the same way. I was holding over $200 in my hand when Little Bit came barging up to the table. She grinned. Daddy, give me some money so I can eat. Looking up from the table, I growled, Eat when you break luck, bitch. She whirled around and ran out of the pool room angrily. 2 colored factory workers showed up with 3 white guys from the afternoon shift with fresh money. They must have played with Ray before because they were all trying to bet that Ray would hit. He couldn't get faded, so I tossed up $10 and winked at him. The dice came out with a 7. His thin woman squealed with joy. She was holding on tight to one of the white players. I tossed up another 10. Again a 7. I kicked his leg and held my right hand below the table and flashed the T. Putting 10 more on the table, I said, Ain't nobody gonna pass all night. If your money is long, the dice gonna show wrong. Everybody around the table wanted to make a bet with me. Wait till he comes out and catches a point, I yelled. Then get your money down. I'm covering all bets. Ray tossed a 6. I laid him a $50 bet that he would miss, then laid 200 around the table. I didn't take any chances. When he came out, I caught the dice and tossed my T in his hand. His next roll was 7. Shoot that money, I yelled while picking the dice up and switching. I picked my side bets up. After 2 more shots, I left the crap game and moved to the front of the pool room. The wineheads started begging for quarters. I gave them $10 to go and get 10 bottles of wine, then sent 3 more wineheads with the first one to make sure he came back. When Ray came out and got in his car, I was standing outside, drinking wine. Between the pool room and restaurant, 20 whores paraded back and forth. I walked over to the car and asked Ray to wait a minute. Looking up and down the sidewalk, I couldn't spot Little Bit anywhere. I stepped inside the restaurant and spotted her sitting with 2 other girls. Did you break luck yet? I asked slowly. How you expect me to do something, huh? I'm too weak from hunger. She cracked loudly, and her girlfriends laughed. I wheeled around and retraced my steps out of the door. On the sidewalk, I found 3 wineheads and paid 2 of them $5 apiece to go in the alley and get me 2 half-full garbage cans. They stared at me as though I were going crazy, but finally realized I was serious. I paid the other man $10, 5 now, and the rest when he returned, to run to the hotel and gather up Little Bit's clothes and bring them back in a paper bag. Ray was sitting on the passenger side with the window down. "Hey, baby," he called, beckoning to me. "What's the deal here? Sit down, Melon."